Here's the finished clamp front chest. It's quite narrow because it was designed to go in our hallway without people running into it at the bottom of the stairs. Let's have a look at how I built it. I had some air-dried rough sawn oak left over from a couple of previous projects and was hoping to get the whole chest out of what I had. I didn't have a piece wide enough for the lid, so I glued a panel out of 2 boards. We'll have a look at that soon. The oak was about 35mm thick, about 1 3/8 inches. Because of the cupping in the boards, I estimated I could get between 3/4 of an inch and 1 inch and still keep the boards full width. That was ideal. I just about had enough material. One of the legs had a nasty knot at the bottom, but most of that came out with a curve, and there's another knot at the bottom of the lower back panel. Few will ever see that, and the worst that can be said of it is that it made ploughing the groove of the bottom boards a bit tricky. Some would make a feature out of it and put it on the front. I started by marking out, cross-cutting and ripping all of the pieces, and then planed them flat and nearly to thickness. Planing oak to thickness with hand planes is invigorating stuff, makes supper worthwhile. Then they spent a while stickered on my carving bench while they adjusted to their new size and surroundings. Once they settled down, I started working on the legs. These serve as the stiles of the panels, the clamps that hold the panels flat and together. For our American friends, these are both legs and breadboard ends. Ideally, I would have left them longer, but I was a bit short of timber, and these just about came out to length. The better looking legs were destined for the front, and the knot and the less cooperative grain were relegated to the back of the chest. The legs cum clamps need a groove to accept the panels and mortises. There are 2 schools of thought on this: chop the mortises, then plough the groove, or the other way round. Convention suggests the former. However, because I didn't at this stage know where the tenons were going to be, I decided to plough the groove, then cut the tongue, make sure it fitted, and then lay out the tenons. Don't feel bound by my eccentricity. Feel free to cut the tongue on the panels first, lay out the tenons, and then chop the mortises. The result will be the same. There are plenty of ways to cut these big tongues and tenons on the ends of the panels. I chose to square a line all around and saw to depth, split away the waste, and then even things up with a rebate plane. If you'd rather shoot the ends square and then cut the tongue with a moving fillister plane, that's as good a way as any. That piece of green tape is to give me an idea of when I've cut to the right depth. It didn't stop me overcutting, of course. There are plenty of routes to profanity in this build. These panels are complicated by the fact that the bottom boards are thicker than the top boards, so I couldn't just split off an equal amount from either side. I had to make sure I was measuring off my reference face each time, so that the thicker section of the bottom board ended up on the inside. Let's have a look at this on the finished chest. I've got a temporary piece of board standing in for the teak grate that's taking its time in the workshop, but it'll show how it works. The shelf rests on the wider lower boards. You could do this with the ends too, but I think this narrow ledge will be more than up to the task. I chopped the mortises with a registered firmer chisel. They're so narrow that any attempt to waste away with a drill is a bit redundant. They went fairly quickly, but it's worth taking some care to make sure they stay square, otherwise your chest will be bow-fronted. Before I could assemble the clamped panels, I had quite a lot of work to do. The ends came next. These hold the front to the back using wedged through tenons. I always think these look more impressive than dovetails, but they're a lot more forgiving. So long as you get the walls of the mortises vertical, and the wedges will take care of any gaps at the top and bottom. Again, rather than do the layout from the ends, I did it from my reference edge. I chopped the waist out, much as I do for dovetails, and really didn't worry about getting the shoulders perfect. These will get buried in a groove ploughed in the stiles. As with the front and back, these get a rebate on the inside of the top and the outside of the bottom. I stuck a bead along the bottom boards. This disguises the gap. The gap is important. Each board can expand and contract a little and not tear the whole panel apart. Building this way, you can build the chest as large as you like, but make sure that you keep the individual boards smallish and give them room to expand without crowding each other. With the tenons cut, I chopped the mortises. Not much to see here. I'm slow and careful, using a chisel that's narrower than the mortise and then paring the walls. There's very little decoration in this chest, so I spent a lot of time playing with curves. I wanted to get the bottoms of the legs just right. One of my goals with this chest was to keep the toolkit small, So to that end I used a chisel level down to cut the curve, rather than the turning saw, or a draw knife, or a spoke shave. I wonder if golf would have been a cheaper hobby. With the legs all but finished, I could no longer avoid cutting the housing that I'd been looking forward to with a bit of trepidation. The bottom of the chest is held in a groove ploughed in the lower boards of the front, back and sides, which means I also needed to cut a housing in the legs. In the end, it was much less trouble than I had braced myself for. The bottom itself is a long run of tongued and grooved pine boards. The tongues on the left face right and those on the right face left, which allowed me to put a removable board in the middle. It's a little shorter than the others and has a groove cut in both edges with one lip removed to create a rebate. This means that I can sweep the detritus that finds its way into a shoebox out of the bottom. I used a specialist plane for this, the Stanley No. 49. You don't need to tongue and groove these boards. Rebates in the edges would have a similar effect. Some plough planes have a tongue iron that matches the 1/4 inch iron, and that's a good option. It takes a while, but with this plane it's easy and foolproof. Setting up a plough plane or combination plane is a little more work. And then, at last, after a bit of pre-finishing, it was time to assemble the carcass. I started by draw boring the stiles to the front and back. These go together with no glue and no clamps. Then fitted the bottom and attached the ends. A dab of glue on one side of each wedge is all that's required. One joint pulled itself open, was clamped back together and a peg put in. Next time I might do this from the outset. Which just left the lid. I actually did this at the start of the build and left it thicker than I needed in case it warped and I had to plane it back into shape. It took me a couple of goes to get the lid together. The first time the glue was too cool, the workshop was unheated and I was too slow. The rub joint wasn't and I redid it. What you're watching is the second go, complete with dogs. I planed a wide chamfer along the front and the sides to lighten the appearance of the lid. And then there was nothing for it but to fit the hinges. Next time I think I'll try to fit these before I assemble the carcass. It would be nice to be able to hold the workpiece still. And with that, it was done. It's a style that I think is worth another look. It doesn't take a whole chest of hand tools to make, but could easily be scaled up to store a good-sized collection. If you're a power tool woodworker, you could knock these out fairly smartly. In terms of complexity and skills, it's somewhere between a 6-board chest and a panelled chest. Once you've built one, a clamped or breadboard tabletop isn't going to present any problems, and you'll find it can be adapted to a range of sizes and purposes.